Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week I thought I'd talk about something kind of unique. It's been on my mind, the history of home entertainment. Stick around. All right, well, thanks for sticking around. You know, I had an interesting week, and I had an experience actually, and I'm going to get to that, but it set me off on a path of thinking about how far we've come and the evolution of home entertainment, specifically music and video, and how it's evolved over the past 100 years. And it's quite interesting. We've gone on quite a journey, and things have evolved significantly, and they're continuing to do so. And so I've been thinking a little bit about, where it started and where it might be going. And so I thought I would, put that in a video and get your feedback on it and see what your thoughts are and what your experience has been and what the impact may be to our hobby. So let's talk through it a bit and start off with where it all began. And that's in the early days of audio. And of course, that's late 1800s. The phonograph is in full swing, let's say, and that is the method of reproducing sound and music. And the Edison is out, and lots of different players. It was a heavy competition back then. 78s were the medium, and that was extremely high tech back then, and they were fairly expensive. You had to be of means to be able to buy a phonograph for your home and be able to put that in your home and buy records. And it was fairly expensive, so not everyone had them, but the community, the public at large, was getting to know what they were. They did have them played in public forums, and you could reproduce sound for the first time rather than seeing it live. It was the only way to see it, hear any music prior to that was, of course, live. And so it was quite a technology shift, and being able to capture that music, put it on a record, and take that record and phonograph somewhere with you and reproduce that to an audience. So quite a technological leap. Several decades later, of course, 1890s into the 1920s, the tube has been developed, and broadcasting is starting to take hold, and radio starts to come into the family, center of the family room, the living room, and programming is starting, and you're getting radio programs playing at specific times of the week, and shows, are coming into the vernacular, and families are gathering around radios in the living room because this is prior to video, and that was the center of the home entertainment for quite a number of years. And so that was also another technological leap, being able to listen to broadcasts from another location many miles away and hear that in your living room. It's quite phenomenal. A lot of folks, probably thought that it couldn't get any better than that. But then it happened again, another evolution. Now in the 1940s, black and white television was introduced, and it changed the game. It went from listening only to those radio stations of prior years to now being able to see people moving on television in a tube and seeing what they're doing and hearing them at the same time. Quite an evolution of technology in the home. And families are now gathered around their televisions. Now again, not very expensive. These were not in every home, but they started to be populated in homes throughout America. But the public was becoming aware of them. And as the pricing went down, others were able to bring them in. So it was starting to proliferate. And during the 40s and 50s, the black and white TV became the center of family entertainment. But at the same time, tube technology was also, the audiophile was coming along and listening to their records, and record quality was improving. So the phonograph was becoming the center of the music world, and audiophiles were putting together their high-end mono systems until 1958. And then the bar was raised again, and it was time to introduce stereo, and you had to go out and buy another speaker and another amplifier and start buying your stereo records. So a lot of evolution during this time, but this established, I think, for many during the 1950s, I think is the era when the audiophile really started to take note, really serious about the quality of their playback. And from that time forward, music became, in and of itself, a separate focus and a part of many people's lives that they never let go. The technology, though, just continued to shift. So for the 1960s and the 1970s, I'll say, we saw lots of improvement in the quality of reproduction. In the 1960s, we saw the evolution of solid state, and the technology improved there. Of course, many will argue that tube technology was still better, but from the consumer perspective and volume, the market typically, for the most part, shifted into solid state. And then in the 1970s, we just saw them perfect the technology into the Watts wars of the 70s. But at the same time, we saw the technology for record playback continue to develop. And it turned into some incredible turntables through the 1970s and, of course, into the 80s. And then in the 1980s, we saw the evolution move again. And in early 1980s, 1982, the CD was introduced, and it provided another new format for music. Didn't have to worry about easy scratches on your records. It was easy to move around, to store, and that technology took off. But also, it was the introduction of the personal stereo, the Walkman. That introduced us to being able to carry our music around with us and being very portable, very convenient, the personal stereo, listening to your music and only for you. And that was a new concept, and it continued to evolve as well. And this was the evolution of music through the 80s. And around 1990 or so, we started seeing a new entry. And now we're back into combining the music that we listen to, or the systems that we use, and adding it to video. So now we're hooking our stereos up to our televisions. And I'll say the very early days, the 1990s, we saw an acceleration of that technology of putting the audio into our stereos. And now we're in the early days of home theater. Now, home theater took off, and we all, not all of us, but many of us focused a lot on those new receivers and that surround sound technology. And it can continue to evolve. Every year it seemed like there was a new format, there was a new type of technology we needed to adopt. In the early days, it was just a left and right, and then suddenly it became left, right, and center channels. A few years later, in the early 2000s, approximately maybe just before that, it became 5-channel, 5.1, 5.2. Now you needed a left, a right, a center, left and right rears, and subwoofers. So it became more complex and was taking up more of our dollars to implement and put in that system. But they weren't finished yet. And in the early 2000s, and the aughts, and then in the early teens, now we're at 9.2. You're now needing speakers in the ceiling, and we're putting together our own theater rooms and going all out. And why go to the theater when you have your own room now and can feel that T-Rex walking across your living room? And so that sort of seemed to be the peak of where the home theater technology took us. Now, many of us will argue that we never left 2-channel audio, and for those of us like me and you, that's true. But for the vast majority, they were vying with how many dollars did they have to spend, and for many of them, they only could afford to put one unit in the room for their music, and it doubled as their home theater and it doubled as their stereo. But technology continued to change and there was an evolution. And in some aspects that was a bit of a step back, but after the introduction of the sound bar, now we went and we contracted a bit. The sound bar for many is good enough. And initially people were hooking them up to their receivers, but then they found out, you know, we don't need that big receiver anymore. And now we can use one speaker and put it right under our TV and add a subwoofer, and that's good enough. So we're sort of, you know, contracting here in how much technology do we need to put out there. But just this week, I had an experience, and I think it's the next evolution, and it will be the next big step in our home entertainment. Now, we're still very early, and the technology is too expensive for most of us, and it will take many of these for us to experience it. But now we're seeing the evolution of the personal video, the Apple Vision Pro. If you haven't experienced it, you need to go to an Apple store and get an idea of what the future of home video is going to be. It's amazing. It is just like what the futuristic movies have predicted for a very long time, and that's that ability to sort of interact with your video. It's that immersive feeling that you're somewhat on if you're familiar with the old Star Trek holodeck, it's somewhat like that. Or I'll say the Avengers movies where Tony Stark is, you know, grabbing things and pulling them around and, you know, all of that. It's super cool and it's super interactive and it's very immersive. And I believe that is where video and pictures are headed. Now, that leaves out that whole part of audio. And I'm not forgetting that. There is, of course, audio there. But for me, and I think for most of us that have never left two-channel stereo and don't like putting on headphones, there are fantastic headphones available today. And if that was all we needed, then we would have adopted them a long time ago. I don't believe the Apple Vision is going to replace very high quality, very emotionally physically feeling the stereo a bit, hearing that, you know, that room filling sound and being able to walk around in it. I don't think headphones will ever replace that experience, at least not for me. So from my perspective, I think this is an opportunity that we might continue to see two-channel stereo music continue to grow. For me, of course, and for us, I think our vintage gear, for a subset of us, might always continue to grow and be in demand, as well as new stereo gear. I recently looked to see how many stereo receivers are available that are new, and I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't that many years ago that I did the same thing, and in a sea of home theater receivers, I think I could only count maybe 2 or 3 stereo receivers. This week when I looked, I think there were about 19 or so. And I was quite surprised. So in a way, it looks like the evolution of video is in a way benefiting stereo again. And so I think we're going to continue to see a bit of a resurgence of stereo in the same way that records have continued to grow. I'm pretty sure I saw a statistic not long ago that records have now outsold CDs. Now we know that physical media has diminished below streaming, but I think there is still a strong group of us that prefer to buy our media and play it in our own systems. And I think that number, although it's still small, but I think it's growing versus contracting. And I found it quite interesting. This experience I had with this Apple Vision Pro was, for me, somewhat profound in a way of seeing the future of video and where it's going to go. Now again, just like the early days of technology, it's very expensive. It's not for most families can't afford it, but eventually the price will continue to come down and it will be in everyone's home. And at that point, then we will look back and go, wow, how did we ever deal with, have entertainment without it, it will be, we will feel like it's always been there. But at the same time, now that we don't need that huge surround system, and currently we just need the TV mounted to the wall and a sound bar underneath, that leaves us with the opportunity to build out our stereo again. Because before we were vying with double duty, we were looking for home theater and combining that with stereo, and I don't think it worked a lot, very well. I think we were many times confusing. We would kind of get lazy and maybe not switch it out of surround sound mode into stereo only mode, and home theater receivers weren't quite great at stereo playback. And so for that kind of time frame, I think we missed out, and the focus wasn't on stereo. And now I think it's an opportunity for the stereo market to be the focus again. And streaming will probably still be the primary way most people consume their music, but for stereo consumption, now we can go back to putting together a nice system in the room while we are still enjoying our home theater soundbar. So that's kind of where I've been thinking lately, and I think it's kind of exciting. I'm very excited about the video. I can tell you it was extremely incredible. It was immersive in a way. A picture, of course, you have to take the right kind of picture, but the format has to be with the right technology. But boy, once you do, you are literally inside that picture. The video is the same way. The ability to sort of feel like you're interacting inside the video, it's the future, and I think it's going to be quite exciting. But at the same time, I'm kind of excited about how it's going to indirectly help stereo as well. And I think we'll go through a bit of a resurgence on appreciating music again. Not that you and I'm speaking to the choir here, right? But for a large segment of the population that had stepped away or had never been exposed to good stereo, I think there's an opportunity here for manufacturers to continue promoting and developing stereo systems. And I think we might see a day where there are more vendors on corners that are producing good quality stereo gear, and we get to go peruse those shops again and listen to what's the latest in stereo offerings. So I think that's kind of exciting for me anyway. Not sure what you guys think, but if you've got some ideas and have thought through that and experienced the Apple Vision Pro, let me know what you guys think. Chime in. If you haven't gone to an Apple store, you just walk in and they'll sign you up and give you a demo of it. I would say if you've got nothing else to do on an afternoon, it's worth an hour of your time to go experience it for free. It doesn't cost anything, and you will get a glimpse of what the future holds. If you've ever been to Disney and you're on one, I can't remember the name of the ride, if you had wings, I think, and you have this humongous screen in front of you and you feel like you're flying, you get that sensation with the Vision Pro. It's quite phenomenal. So if you haven't done it, go do it. No loss. You get to try something new and see where the future is headed. So I think that's it for this week. Something that's been on my mind, something kind of interesting that I was thinking through. So I hope you appreciated that. If you did, give us a thumbs up. You don't want to miss that next video. Hit subscribe. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in.